And I'd like to open the July 2nd, 2020 school committee meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation / Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19th, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. These concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to a board's public meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring but is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room which are not incorporated into the public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask the people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of the raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute, then state their name and address. After speaking, we request the participant return their microphone back to mute. All right. Before we get into school committee business, I would like to start the meeting by thanking Jen Wilson for her 3 years of service to Littleton and the school district. Jen is a passionate and effective advocate for equality, and social and emotional learning. Littleton is always better off when we have contested races because it gives the community a chance to listen to a freewheeling exchange of viewpoints on the issues facing our town, but it often means that a strong, qualified candidate comes up short on the end of the vote. And that is exactly what happened in this instance. Again, we thank Jen and are confident and hopeful she will find other opportunities to volunteer her time on the community's behalf. So thank you, Jen. All right. The first thing we need to do at this meeting, because it is the first meeting after an election, is the school committee reorganization. We need to elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary. So at this point, I'm going to pass control of the meeting temporarily to Superintendent Schcmte, so he can take the motions regarding the first would be the election of the chair.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everybody. At this time, I would like to accept nominations for the position of chairperson.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Mike Fontanella as chair.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Any other nominations? We'll do a roll call vote. And I'll start with Matt.
Matt Hunt, aye. Yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Did you say me?
Yes.
I didn't hear you. You froze. Timlin Rossius, yes.
And Brad?
Brad Austin, yes.
All right, congratulations, Mike, and I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
All right, thank you. At this point, I'll accept nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Matthew Hunt for vice chair.
Do I have a second?
I second Brad Austin.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Justin?
Justin McCarthy, aye.
Timlin?
Timlin Rossius, yes.
Brad?
Brad Austin, yes.
And Mike Fontanella votes yes as well. And given Kelly, I think it's a very good idea that we won't make Matt vote for himself. So thank you. All right. And lastly, we need a nomination for secretary.
Make a motion to nominate Brad Austin as secretary. Is that the wrong one?
That's fine.
Oh, sorry.
That's great.
Do I hear a second?
I messed that up, sorry.
No second on that one. All right. I'll take other nominations for secretary.
Should I be offended?
No, I guess this was.
Somebody's got to do it. Who's up for it? Give me a nomination.
Make a motion to nominate Timolin Rossius as secretary.
Can I get a second on that one?
I will second that. Justin McCarthy, second.
All right, terrific. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Matt?
Matt Hunt, yes.
Brad?
Brad Austin, yes.
Justin McCarthy?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
And Mike Fontella votes yes as well. All right, terrific. We're done with that. The next thing we're going to do on the agenda is subcommittee appointments. But before we do that, because we do have 3 new members, I'd like to jump a little bit and give the opportunity for the new school committee members to briefly introduce themselves. I thought maybe if they could just tell us how long they've been living in Littleton, what their professional background is, and maybe a couple of their goals or areas of interest while they're on the school committee would help us kind of kick off this new committee. So at this point, I will start with Justin.
Sure. Justin McCarthy, obviously. I've been in town for 10 years, I believe. I have 3 young children at the early stages of the school system. A rising 3rd grader, 2nd grader, and then my youngest child is 2nd year preschool. I first became involved with school committee just like 3 years ago when there was a push for tuition-free kindergarten, so that kind of sparked my interest. School committee's done a wonderful job pushing that forward, so I'd like to see that through, or help see that through towards its the finish. And then my background, I'm in banking. I do commercial lending locally, and I hope to be able to bring some ideas or work within the budget landscape of the school committee. I want to make sure that the school committee maintains its funding at an adequate level, and also that we run an efficient budget as well. So I look forward to it.
Thank you. How about Timolin?
Hi, I'm Timolin Rossius. I lived in Littleton since 2002. I have 3 children. One graduated last year, 2019, from Littleton High School. I have a rising senior and a rising 8th grader. Professionally, I've been an administrative assistant in the town of Concord for the past 3 years. I graduated back a long time ago with a computer science degree. And I'd like to really talk about and work on the buildings and seeing that our class sizes stay small and being maybe a voice for the parents to come to and community to come to, that if they have concerns or questions.
All right, thank you. How about Brad?
Hey, I'm Brad Austin. I've lived in Littleton for 16 years now. Professionally, I'm a professor of history and history education at Salem State University. And what I'm most interested in is for next year or so is kind of having a voice and thinking about the kind of reopening plan and making sure that that the school system is supported in its decisions. Beyond that, I'm very interested in, I have 2 daughters in the school system. One's a junior and one's a rising 4th grader. I'm very interested in making sure that all of our kids are supported, and especially those with special needs, and which will be a particular challenge, I think, over the next year and a half. I want to make sure that those people get the education they deserve. And then more broadly, like Timolin, like Justin and Mike and Matt, I want to make sure that the school committee can serve as a conduit for kind of the public to talk to central office and make sure the community's interests are heard. And I'm very interested in curriculum stuff. That's where some of my academic training is. And I'd like to make sure that we continue to offer a robust curriculum that offers all the students a chance to kind of identify what their interests are and to explore them. So I'm looking forward to the work.
All right, thank you. It's been a while since we've had this many new members in 1 year, so, and it's going to be a busy year, but I'm confident that we're going to get right into the deep end of the pool. And to do that, we need to go through the subcommittee appointments. This is, we don't really require votes on this. It's more of a consensus building exercise. In your package, you have a list of the standing subcommittees and positions. There are two that I want to talk about that are not on the list, but we'll get to those. The first subcommittee is the Bradford Sampson Scholarship Trust, and this just gives the school committee representation on the distribution of scholarship money to graduating seniors and alumni. It's fun and it's worthwhile. It's not a heavy lift. The Bradford Sampson Scholarship Trust has their own board of directors and group that does the actual distribution, but we do have representation. The current assignment is Daryl Baker, so we definitely need someone new on this one. Is there anybody who would be interested in putting their name next to this?
I would.
All right. Anybody else, or are we good with Brad taking that one for a year?
Sounds good to me.
That would be fine. I'm also interested in it, but if it's a one-person job,
It
by all means,
kind of
Brad.
is. Yeah. I mean, listen, if you want to reach out to them, as long as, if we put more than two members on, we just got to watch out for open meeting requirements. But two people, if they wanted to do it, I don't think they would object, but we can work that out with the scholarship trust. All right. But for now, we'll put Brad's name on there. The
That's
second
fine.
one is the Permanent School Planning Committee. Timlin actually talked about this a while ago. But right now, this is not an active subcommittee. Given that we are working towards a submission on Shaker Lane with the MABC, we may decide to make this active going forward, but we're still a little ways away before anything really significant happens in that regard. So I think at this point, we can just leave this one with no assignment, and we'll circle back to it when we feel the need to. The third one is evaluation. This is managing the superintendent's evaluation. This is, again, it's not a heavy lift in the terms of it's only something that has to be done over a course of a few weeks in the spring of each year. And then there's nothing really to worry about until the next time. Having said that, it's a very important position. The evaluation of the superintendent is one of our primary responsibilities. And it is a fairly regimented task. It requires sending out the evaluation materials to all the school committee members, then getting them back, compiling them, and then meeting with the superintendent to review it, and then submitting it for a discussion at public meeting. Is there anybody who has a particular interest in picking up the ball on this? It was Erica Pard-Gorney, and then Daryl's done it as well. So we definitely need someone new to take this up.
I can take this up, Mike. I've got enough experience now that I'd feel comfortable doing it.
Okay. Is that all right with everybody else?
Thank you.
All right,
Fine.
very good. We'll put Matt on that. The next one is the Regionalization Study Committee. Again, there is no talk about regionalization at the time, so we'll leave this one empty. The Permanent Municipal Building Committee, this one is a bit of a heavy lift. There are extra meetings associated with this. And Daryl did mention at our last meeting that it's important for the school committee member who takes this on to be committed to making those meetings, because this committee sometimes has difficulty making a quorum. They do important work. They oversee all the capital building projects in town. And again, because Shaker Lane will be coming forward over the next year or two, it's important that we have some representation on here. Is there anybody who's looking to be on the Permanent Municipal Building Committee?
I'd like to take that one on.
All right. Is there anybody
Thank
else,
goodness.
or are we good with Timlin?
I'm good with Timlin.
Everybody's running for Timlin to let her do it. All right, thank you, Timlin.
Yep.
All right, next is the Technology Committee, updating the district's technology plan, working with a subcommittee on that. It's currently Matt Hunt. Matt, do you want to keep doing it? Do you want to try to pass this on?
I'm fine either way. If anyone has a particular interest in technology, feel free to take it. But if not, I'll keep it.
Is there anybody who's jonesing to get in on the Technology Subcommittee? I see no hands going up, so we'll leave that with Matt.
All right.
All right, the next assignment is legislation, keeping the school committee up to date on pending legislation and working with the superintendent on legislative matters and occasionally expressing the committee's opinions on legislative matters to our representatives. It was Jen Wilson, so we definitely need someone to take this up. Is there anybody interested in the legislation? If not, I'll do it. I don't have a problem doing it. And I'm going to get off the budget subcommittee if I can. So I'll put my name next to this one. All right. The next one is policies. This is something that we take very seriously. We've done a good job, especially with Daryl driving the bus over the past several years. We want to definitely keep up the momentum. I do feel that this is a good opportunity for new members to review the policy manual, become familiar with it. So we can actually, I would like to put 2 members on this. Are there 2 of you that would be interested in doing this? Brad's got his hand up. Timlin?
I mean, I'll do it unless Justin wants to.
I got my eye on a couple other ones. So.
All right, we'll put Brad and Timlin on that. Thank you. The next is oath to bills and payroll. This requires the ability to come by central office and sign payroll in the accounts payable. This is something I've been doing. I have access to Littleton on a regular basis. I'm pretty much here every day. I don't mind continuing to do it, but if anybody wants to review the warrants for payroll just to gain familiarity with how the money is spent, I'm happy to let someone else do it. All right, seeing none, I will continue to go by central office. All right, next is liaison with town government and to serve as the general school committee contact with town boards. This is kind of a nebulous assignment. We put someone officially on this, but obviously the chair and there's different opportunities for us to put particular members in front of particular boards depending on different projects that are going on or issues that arise. It's currently Erica Podgorny, so we definitely need someone to put their name next to this one. Anybody interested? Justin, I saw your hand go up.
I can assist there, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Good with everybody else. All right. Terrific. All right. The next is negotiations. This is working with the school committee's attorney and the superintendent during negotiations with collective bargaining units. It's currently Matt and I. We are currently in the middle of a negotiation that was interrupted during the pandemic. I think that it would be appropriate for continuity's sake for Matt and I to try to finish this one out. All right. We're good on that. Thank you. The next is representative to the Community Services Park and Recreation Department. Currently Matt. Matt, what do you think?
Anybody wants to jump in there, feel free. But if not, I'll keep it.
I mean, Matt, if you don't particularly care to continue, I'll take it off your hands, but.
Wait, take it off my hands.
All right. We'll put Justin in there.
Okay.
The next one is Budget Subcommittee, currently myself and Matt Hunt. Again, I think this is a particular subcommittee that I think would be good for me to start stepping back and letting some of the new people get involved and gain familiarity. So I'm happy to step back. I do think it would be worthwhile to have some continuity. So I think it would be a good idea to leave Matt on there. But is there anybody that wants to jump on with him? Did somebody say they were in banking and had budget experience?
I did that with Matt. Justin McCarthy would be happy to help there.
All right. Does that go to everybody else? All right. Thank you, Justin. Next is Safety and Security. This is a subcommittee that meets periodically to work on safety and security. We do need someone new to take this up. Is there anybody this does require some extra meetings, typically in the late afternoon with other town staff and school staff. Who is interested in safety and security?
I can do that.
Timlin?
I'm interested in that.
Okay. Is that fine with everybody else?
If no one else wants it.
Okay. Next is CPAC. This is the Special Education Parents Advisory Committee. I believe that's the acronym. Currently Jen Wilson, so we do need someone to act as our CPAC liaison.
I'd like to do that.
Okay. Is that good with everybody else?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. All right. There are 2 more that are not listed on here. The first is the Master Plan Implementation Committee. This is a committee that meets to support the master plan and interfaces with other boards and committees in town in order to support the master plan. I've been on it. Currently, my term on it is up, so we need, as a school committee, we get school committee representation. The school committee gets an appointee to this committee. I'm happy to keep doing it. I'm probably only going to do it for another year. It is a 3-year term, but I'm happy to do it for 1 more year, and then we can transition someone onto it if I'm not around after the next fiscal year. Does anybody else want to get on that?
I'm fine getting on it eventually, but if you want to hold on to it for the year, that's fine.
Okay. All right, I will do that. And then the other one is not a standing committee. It'll be busy for a while, and then we won't have it any longer. But Superintendent Clenchey has asked for school committee representation on the reopening task force to help determine how we reopen in September. Is there anybody on the school committee that would like to volunteer to meet to do that?
I can.
Okay. Timlin, do you want to do it? Or is Brad?
Oh, no, Brad's fine.
Brad's fine. Okay, Brad,
Brad's
you're
good.
fine.
If no one was
Thank you.
going to, Brad's
Give it a
good.
second, but I'll get it.
I think Brad's more than fine. I'm going to be
He's
honest
more
with you,
than
Brad.
fine. He's great. I was stepping up because I didn't think anybody else was.
All right, I think that's it. Superintendent Clench, is there anything that we may have missed in this regard?
Oh, I think we're good.
All right, excellent. All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda, the minutes from June 11th, 2020, and oath to bills and payroll. Just for clarification, you do not need to have been at the meeting or even on the school committee to vote to approve the consent agenda. So at this point, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the oath and the consent agenda for, sorry, what day was it?
June 11th.
For June 11th, 2020.
All right, and oath to bills and payroll. Do I get a second on that?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Matt?
Matt Hunt, yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Timlin?
Emily Rossius, yes.
Brad?
Brad Austin, yes.
And Mike Fontanella votes yes as well. All right, we have 2 sections in the meeting for input from interested citizens, one now and one closer to the end of the meeting. At this point, if there are any members of the public who would like to speak before the school committee, just use the raise your hand function and we will recognize you. Dorothy, do we see anybody raising their hand?
I do not.
Okay, so we'll continue on. At this point, I'd like to do a fairly short presentation on school committee roles and responsibilities. I know that I've had conversations with each of the new members about this, and it's something that we kind of generally talk about at school committee meetings as various topics are debated. But I thought it would be good for all of us and the public to kind of get a little bit more in-depth discussion and presentation on the specific roles of the school committee. It's not necessarily always what people think it is. In 1993, the Massachusetts legislature passed what they call the Ed Reform Act in shorthand, and it significantly changed the way school committees and school administrations function and demarcated roles and responsibilities. Do we have the presentation up on LCTV? Yeah, we're starting it. All right, I'll just keep going on then. Under Mass General Law, Part 1, Administration of the Government, Title 12, Education, Chapter 71, Public Schools, and Section 37, it says that the school committee in each city and town and each regional school district shall have the power to select and terminate the superintendent, shall review and approve budgets for public education in the district, and shall establish educational goals and policies for the schools in the district, consistent with requirements of state law, and statewide goals and standards established by the Board of Education. So really what it gives us is 3 explicit, in that particular act, responsibilities. We select, evaluate, and conceivably terminate the superintendent. We review and approve budgets for public education. We establish educational goals and policies. And also in another section of Mass General Law, the school committee retains the role and responsibility as the employer of school employees for collective bargaining purposes. So we are the drivers of collective bargaining. We can sometimes defer that down to the superintendent, but we have to explicitly do that. The superintendent employed by the school committee, again, this is from Mass General Law, shall manage the system in a fashion consistent with state law and policy determinations of the school committee. And then Below him on the org chart, principals are the educational administrators and managers of their schools and shall supervise the operation and management of their schools and school property, subject to the supervision and direction of the superintendent. So per the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, on their website, they kind of break this down and they have guidance, and these particular points right here are right from their guidance documents. In what it means is that the school committee is the publicly elected or appointed equivalent of a board of directors of a corporation, which in this case would be the school system. The school committee has oversight of and responsibility for the school system, sets the direction in which a system must go, and establishes criteria to determine if its goals and policies are being met. But it's the superintendent who serves as the school committee's chief executive officer and educational advisor. So the superintendent is the educational leader of the school system and provides administrative leadership for all school staff and operational matters in proposing and implementing policy changes. In a nutshell, it means that the day-to-day operation of the system is the responsibility of the superintendent together with the school principals and other administrative staff members. That's from the DESE guidance. It's very explicit that day-to-day operation is the purview of the superintendent and his staff and not the school committee. They continue to discuss it. They have some good examples, and there's documentation out there. I kind of picked and chose a couple of things that I thought would help illustrate the idea, but if you want to do more reading, you just can go up on their website and you can find the document that I pulled this stuff from. But this is like the type of example of things they talked about. Broad system-wide curriculum or school restructuring issues, such as whether the district should, as an example, that's not what we're talking about, but establish a French immersion program for grades K through 6, or whether to switch from a junior high to a middle school structure. These are two examples that would be of ideas that would be aligned with educational goals and policies for the district. And as policy issues, these matters are for the school committee to decide, obviously after seeking advice and recommendation from the superintendent. On the other hand, in contrast, school committees should not decide at what grade level teachers are to start teaching students cursive writing, which I believe now is never, but that's a different story. As an operational issue, that decision would be left to the professional educators. Also, for instance, the selection and purchase of textbooks and other educational materials are the responsibility of the school principals under the direction of the superintendent and within the budget set by the school committee. But the choice of materials is clearly under the purview of the administration and not the school committee. In terms of hiring, there are some contradictions in Mass General Law regarding hiring responsibility for certain positions. DESE guidance is that the appointment of the school business administrator, the administrator of special education, school physicians and nurses, and supervisors of attendance, if we have that, should be the responsibility of the superintendent. The school committee clearly hires the superintendent and any assistant superintendents if that's the case, and should rely on the superintendent to hire the other personnel who serve the school district as part of the administrative team. This view, according to the DSE, is reinforced by general law cited here, which gives the superintendent the authority to dismiss any employee of the school district. That responsibility lies with him and not with the school committee. Past practice in Littleton is that the hiring of the business manager remains the school committee's responsibility, but the superintendent is responsible for hiring the PPS director, curriculum director, and other administrative staff. Mass General Law is clear that the superintendent appoints principals for each public school in the district, that's directly his responsibility. The superintendent also appoints administrators and other personnel not assigned to particular schools. Principals are responsible, subject to the approval of the superintendent, for hiring all teachers, instructional or other administrative aides, and other personnel assigned exclusively to their school, and for terminating all such personnel, subject to review and prior approval by the superintendent and subject to the provisions of state law. So it's very explicit that the hiring of staff and especially teachers is in the purview of the administration and not the school committee. However, the DSE does give guidance that, consistent with the need for open communication between superintendents and school committees, it is good management practice for the superintendent to keep the school committee informed about appointments and other personnel decisions. Regardless of who makes the actual appointment, the hiring authority should consult with other key parties in the process. For example, the school principal plays a critical role in selecting the athletic coaches for the school, even though the superintendent makes the official appointment. It is also good practice for superintendents and principals to involve broad-based screening committees, particularly school council, which represent teachers, parents, and community members in the hiring process whenever possible. This is DESE guidance and is clearly practiced in Littleton. When we've hired principals in the past, when we've hired PPS directors in the past, we've definitely formed screening committees with representation from various stakeholders. So that's something that we adhere to in Littleton. This is not DESE guidance. This is just sort of my summation that the idea is that the school committee should always consult with the superintendent administrative staff, listening carefully and giving sincere consideration to their input prior to making any decisions regarding budget, policy, or collective bargaining. The things that we are in charge of, even though we are in charge of it, we don't do it on an island. That we would definitely always be consulting with the superintendent administrative staff. And conversely, the superintendent administrative staff should be in constant and consistent communication with the school committee prior to making any substantive decisions regarding staff hires or changes to the curriculum. And again, that has definitely been the practice in Littleton on both those points. And lastly, just to sort of sum it up, both the school committee and district administration should be committed to communicating all major decisions regarding district operations, policy, budget, and staffing to the Littleton community. This may entail public input forums beyond standard school committee meetings, as well as the inclusion of students, parents, and community members on various committees and task force where deemed appropriate. That is, those are all things that we've done in the past. As a school committee, it's what I expect that we will do. I just wanted to sort of, again, take the opportunity with new members to remind ourselves and the community and the administration, frankly, how we see our role, how we understand it, and make sure that it says right in the DESE guidance. I made this sound very clear cut, but it says in their guidance, most of this stuff is gray area, and it takes communication and discussion to make sure that we get it right. We've been very fortunate in Littleton over the past 14 years that I've been involved. I don't really feel like we've had any significant or even minor really problems keeping those lines clear and communicated to everybody, and I think we've done pretty well. So given that, at this point, if there's anybody that has any comments or input or questions, I'd like to hear them.
Just that was really helpful. That was helpful in helping us understand, me as a new member, understand the position. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right, thank you. Hopefully that'll be the longest I ever talk to you guys without a break for all our sake. I'll try to stick to that. All right, next under new business, we have DESE, initial fall reopening guidance. So Superintendent Clenchey, do you want to take us through that?
Sure, thank you. First of all, I'd like to welcome the 3 new school committee members. You're entering the school committee realm under interesting circumstances, but I can assure you we're up to the challenge, and together we'll get through this and we will continue to prosper as a school district. So having said that, last week we sent a letter home to parents with guidelines that were released on June 25th, preliminary guidance for fall reopening. There are still a number of items that need to be thought of, and as superintendents, we certainly need direction. I've mentioned a number of times at school committee meetings and the letters I've sent home, 80 to 90% of what we're going to be doing in every district in Massachusetts will be prescribed, and it'll be prescribed by the state, driven by medical experts and infectious disease experts, etc. So we will, though, as like any district, it's unique. Every school is unique. We're going to be able to do some things that will be tailored to our community's needs. But I guess what the key takeaway this evening tonight that I'd like you to think about is whatever we do, the safety of our students and staff will be at the forefront of every decision that we make. And right now, within the state, we've done a good job of curbing the infection rates of COVID-19. When you turn on the news, though, we can't say that about 35 other states. And it'll be interesting to watch what happens as we move forward. At this point in time, the conversations that we're having with medical experts and the Department of Education are indicating that Of the 3 models that they've proposed in the document that I've already said is enclosed in the package, they're hoping for in-person learning with new safety requirements. In terms of physical distancing, they're looking at 3 feet. So over the past few days, I've been working with our principals to take a look at their schools to see what we need to do to be able to make this happen. Shaker Lane School, they have a mixed match of furniture, etc. So the only snag we have there is we're going to have to order in 150 desks to make this work. We're also going to have to clean out a number of classrooms. As you can appreciate, we work very hard to create centers in our classrooms and flexible seating. But with the physical distance requirements, we're not going to have that luxury until we get a better handle of COVID-19 in this nation. So we're going to have to find a storage facility for some of this furniture. Russell Street School is going to be okay as well, having all students attend in the fall if again, the medical advice continues to be in that direction. We do not have to purchase any furniture for Russell Street, but we are going to have to clean some furniture out of the building to make sure that we maintain that 3-foot distance between students. Middle school is also fine, same thing. We're going to have to declutter, for lack of a better word. High school is a little more complicated. I'm confident with the size of our high school and the space that we have, we'll figure it out. But their schedules are much more complex, and the principal is looking at their tentative enrollments in the various classes. They may have to assign teachers to different classrooms, etc., use other spaces. But in the end, I'm confident that we'll be able to offer full-day schooling with all of our students if that's the direction that's set in the fall. The 2 other models, hybrid model of learning, there are many names for it. State has chosen the hybrid model. That is a scenario where we would actually have half of our students attend school at a time, the other half would be in remote learning. There are various ways that could be handled, and that's part of the task force job, is to figure out what's going to be best for Littleton. We are looking at ways, we haven't had our first meeting yet, but we've certainly been thinking about this 24 hours a day. We really need to think about, in all of our grades, a way of offering instruction, whether we use any of the 3 models that decreases number of courses that kids are taking a day. In high school, that might be the simplest explanation to use. Well, there are 4x4 block schedules, and really it's a semestered approach. If you have been out of high school long enough, you'll appreciate what that is. So rather than 7 courses at a time during the year, you would take 4 courses or 3 courses, depending on what the student's schedule is. That allows us to reduce the number of classes students are taking, spend more time in fewer subject areas, and it will allow us, if necessary, to toggle or transition between the 3 models, if necessary. One thing that we've been told, and it makes complete sense, is all 3 plans need to intertwine and relate to each other in a fashion that it will be easy to go from one model to the next. We don't know what this year is going to bring. The governor has indicated that they're going to really look at what needs to be done in communities based on infection rates. So if there's a community that has a high infection rate, they would obviously take a look at remote learning. On communities that have low infection rates, they would be more flexible in having us have in-person learning or a hybrid model approach. So again, we're in uncharted waters. We'll be ready for it, and there's a lot of unknown. In terms of some of the things we're waiting for, transportation is certainly a big item that we need direction on. How are we going to transport students to school? What kind of distance is going to be required? What kind of PPE, etc. We do not have direction on this yet. But if we went to again, I don't want to speculate at all today with you, but if we had to double our bus runs, we would have to double our costs. So we're really hoping that we don't have to do that, figure out a way that we can transport students and maintain the current costs for our transportation. The disinfecting of schools is another thing that we're waiting for. If well, even if we don't have COVID-19 cases within our school system, how are we expected to follow protocols for disinfecting our schools on a daily basis and a weekly basis to make sure that we do whatever we can to keep the virus out of our schools. Then we're still waiting for directions. If we do have a positive case of COVID-19, what kind of protocols and procedures need to be put in place? That's a very important one as well, because if there's going to be any sort of requirement in terms of not having activity in the building for hours, we need to know how many hours that is, because that's certainly going to dictate how we design our models for any school district. So some key things, money, if you've read the document, you've seen a section in that document that talks about $225 per student. We're not sure how that's going to be dispersed. In any state that you're in, money is dispersed in many different fashions, depending on where it's coming from, if it's federal or state funding. Sometimes money is dispersed on the basis of free and reduced lunches, your percentage rate within your student population. Other times money is dispersed that is dependent on Title I services. And money is also dispersed based on the assessments in the community. So what I mean by that is Littleton is anywhere between 23 and 25% subsidized by the state. So to keep this simple, for every dollar we spend in education, 75% comes from community taxation, 25% would come from state taxation. So that $225 per student could mean many different things. So we're kind of anxious to find out what that means so that we have a better understanding of how much money that actually comes in. It can make a tremendous difference. Speaking of that, to date, before you've been elected to the school committee, we have made a decision as an administrative team and school committee to purchase technology for K-5 so that we can employ any three of those models without any problems or issues. So we've already done that. That's going to be about an $80,000 item. And it will allow us to have Chromebooks for students in grades 1 to 5, individual Chromebooks, so there'll be no sharing of Chromebooks, etc. We're also purchasing equipment for teachers so that they can remain connected to their teachers if we have a hybrid model of learning or a remote model of learning. A lot of things still need to be determined as we work together as a task force. Again, I would appreciate the public working with us and understanding that we don't have all the answers yet, but we will. We don't have a lot of time to figure this out. We're going to have to submit our plans in early August to the Department of Education. We're also going to have to negotiate those plans with the local Teachers Association. Those plans are also going to have to be endorsed by our local health board. So there's a lot of process that needs to be involved as we begin to move forward. When we took a look at how do we organize a process that's going to be meaningful and efficient, we first of all started with a district task force. We have 30 people on that task force already, which is a little large, but we couldn't figure out a way to decrease that number. But then we've established school-based task force, and that's where people or individuals from the district task force will be working at the school level. The principal will be at the helm of that committee and will involve parent representatives and, when appropriate, student representatives as well, and work at honing those plans. What we need to do within the larger entity is interpretate the document, make sure that we all understand what limitations we have, and we really do need to have some degree of consistency within our district. Although every school is unique unto itself, different age groups will require greater flexibilities and models. So there will be a district framework, but within that framework, it will be tailored for the needs of each individual school. I'm excited to start this process. Our next meeting is, our first meeting, more correctly, is next Wednesday, July 8th, and it's at 1 p.m. and it will be a virtual meeting. With the stage 3 reopening for the state being released today, I was a little disappointed that the maximum number of people that you can have together is 25. We have 30, so we're not going to be able to meet in person until they lift those restrictions. So it's always nice to meet in person, but we are becoming very used to and proficient meeting virtually, but I would much prefer to be meeting in person with all the meetings that I attend. When I'm just taking a look at anything to make sure I didn't miss anything. I didn't talk about PPE acquisition. The state released guidelines a few weeks ago and recommended that we begin purchasing 3 months of PPE for staff and students. A 3-month price tag for us would run close to $80,000. So just so you know, the expenses are there, and we are in good shape financially, but at the same time, we do not know what September is going to bring with Chapter 70. So the town and the school committee and the administration of all departments have worked hard to try to predict what may happen, and we have designed budgets that hopefully took into account what we may or may not be facing now with Chapter 70 revenue. I'm being told from the state that we should be thinking about a level service plus budget, but you know, until I have a better indication that this is actually going to happen, I would love to see that, but I also am cautious, and I want to make sure that whatever we do as a district, we are in good shape rather than assuming we're going to get something and we don't. So that's you know, one of the unknowns as we move forward. If you've been watching what's happening in the state, many districts, or some districts, not many districts, decided to lay off significant numbers of staff just in case. We were in a position where we're fairly lean as it is, and we were able to financially figure out a way to keep our staff. So we're in good shape that way. For some districts that have laid off all their non-PTS teachers, I really don't know how they're going to figure out what they're going to do in September, because they have far more challenges than we will have in terms of class sizes, sufficient teachers to offer classes, etc. So I guess what I'm really trying to say to you, we're very fortunate in Littleton that we've planned and have saved for a rainy day fund that can be utilized in cases of emergencies, and that's certainly going to help us out for the upcoming year. FY22, we don't know. And I'm really hoping, as I said to a couple of new school committee members, that our economy bounces back fairly quickly during this next year. Any questions?
Questions or comments from school committee members? Brad?
Thank you for that report. It answered a lot of my questions. One of my questions was to what degree these DESE requirements are mandates and what degree they're suggestions. It seems to be 80-90% you said this will be kind of guidelines and mandates. This is obviously an important issue that's important to a lot of parents, myself included, but I've heard from a lot of folks as well. And you mentioned that the task force at the school level is going to have parent participation. Is there a method for parents to volunteer if they want to volunteer for that, or is that something where they'll be contacted?
We're going to actually discuss that at our first meeting, and we have to make some decisions in terms of are we going to tap our PTAs and school councils, since they've been working with the schools for a number of years, and then reach out on an as-needed basis. What we have to ensure is that whatever configuration we use, it's going to be efficient and effective so that we can move forward and come up with something tangible. We're also going to be surveying parents during the summer as well. Mm-hmm. We're actually waiting to send a survey out, and the superintendents have made a request to the medical community that's working with the Department of Education, as well as with the infectious disease experts too. start getting information out to our public throughout the state in terms of why they feel that full-time in-school classes are warranted in the fall. I have the luxury of having that information and reading studies, but they really need to put ads on TV and social media and start having those conversations in a public domain. So we will be sending that out in the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping that they take our advice seriously and start doing that. These are big decisions that we have to make. And as I've said before, the safety of our students and staff are our first priority.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I certainly appreciate your commitment to open communication. That's going to be essential for us moving together as a community. Can I ask one other question? If I read the guidelines correctly, it either requires or suggests very strongly that we have a specific focus on special needs and on this, kids who are getting services. That was such a challenge. I experienced it myself with our family, but also heard from other folks that some parts are really successful and other parts weren't. So would that be the larger task force's obligation? Is there a subcommittee about special needs? Because we're going to have a really good plan for that.
Well, it'll start with the larger committee and making sure we have consistency in terms of our expectations. We've had an opportunity to start digesting the survey results from the survey we sent out in June, and we knew it was really tough to deliver some of the services that we wanted to deliver to some of our students. And we were following guidance, state guidance, federal guidance, and as I'm sure all of you realize, if it comes to any type of legislative change, it doesn't happen overnight. Even the fact that MCAS exams were not administered this past year, you would think that would be easy, but it was not. There was a lot of negotiation going on at both the national and state level, and they were able to get that done. But the document does spell out a few things that as superintendents we've been asking the commissioner to seriously consider. And that is when we're dealing with special needs students, for example, that may have smaller classes. That really does give us an opportunity to have schedules that may be different than students in regular classes, because if we had to go to a blended model, for example, we should be able to keep a good number of those students full-time anyway, depending on what their accommodations are. And we all know when it comes to delivering specialized services, the best way to do that is in person.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, Kelly, just quickly, for the task force, is there any talk about having consistency for expectations for teachers in the fall if we are in a hybrid mode or a full remote learning? I know that talking to different parents, they're getting a lot of different experiences dependent on the teacher. And some teachers are having Google Meets multiple times a week, and then other teachers never had a Google Meet during that period, and just would assign work, and that they'll be following curriculum that's set forth. Is that something that we talked about in the task force?
We certainly will, and Matt, that's going to go well beyond the task force in terms of it's going to become part of our negotiating process with the union.
Yeah.
When we first went into this venture, this was new to most of our staff. Some staff had some experience if you had worked in another state, for example, where they emphasized more of a blended approach to learning. But we really were faced with transformational change within a matter of weeks. And plus, for the first 3 weeks, we were still immersed in conversations about federal and state laws in terms of what we can and cannot do, so that we're not seen as being inequitable in our delivery of education to students. But I've been hearing the same thing, and I've heard a lot of positive things, but I've also heard I've had some conversations with parents that are concerning to me. There are different proficiency levels that staff had when they first went into this venture. But we provided a lot of training for staff during the last 3 months, and we're continuing to do so during the summer months. So Personally, as a superintendent, I am going to be looking for more explicit expectations in the memorandum of understanding with the teachers union, so that we're more on a level playing field. I also like to say that we were saddled with the half day of schooling, which worked well considering the circumstances. But if we go into this venture where we're going to have to use a hybrid model or a full out of school model, we're going to have to somehow replicate a regular school day. And you heard me talk earlier about trying to decrease the number of subjects on a given day so that we can spend more time in an environment that is more conducive for learning in a virtual environment or a blended environment. And we can't, it's pretty hard to toggle through those three models unless you do that for every model. So I'm really looking forward to those conversations. I have some definite ideas for grades K to 8 as well. And there are ways to reduce the number of subjects that students are taking. We've had this conversation before COVID-19 has hit with our middle school and high school when we did focus group sessions with our students. It was very clear that the stress levels of our students certainly aren't decreasing throughout time. And school stress is one of the things that was certainly concerning to the administrative team as well as myself. I truly believe that one way to help reduce stress, even when we're through COVID-19, is to try to think of better ways, especially at high school, to reduce the number of courses that students are taking during a day. It makes a big difference. I've had an opportunity to have school districts that have used different models, and when I think about the experience that I've had, I've been happiest as a superintendent when we've decreased the number of courses students are taking at a time. So I'm really hoping that we can work together to figure something out for the coming year and hopefully beyond.
Great, thank you.
All right. Justin or Timlin?
Yeah, Kelly, you mentioned Chromebook purchases, I think grades 1 through 5. Do you plan to individually assign those to students, or will they be held in queue and deployed in the event that we are in a phase 2 or phase 3 of this, or are they going to be worked into the curriculum and be used for homework as well?
They're going to be worked into the curriculum. We've done I think a tremendous job of converting over to Google Classroom in an age-appropriate way. One of the concerns we have, even if we're back in school full time, is making sure that everything that students and staff touch is sterilized. And if we start sharing equipment, that's a big issue. And so by having individual computer devices, that's certainly going to help. And we're really going to have to spend some time when we get back in September training staff and also helping students realize, what do you need to do to be as safe as possible? Simple things like washing hands throughout the day, but things like even sharing pencils and pens. It's hard to break habits. I mean, even when I'm out and about meeting with people, I make sure I take my own pens, but more often than not, somebody asks me for my pen to sign documents, etc. And it's fine, but we have to be careful. We don't know who's carrying this virus or not. I mean, there are many people that are asymptomatic as well. So we're certainly going to need to spend some time, talking to our students and also training our staff on how to make sure our environments are as sterile as possible.
Thank you.
Timlin, any questions or comments? Okay. I have a couple questions and comments. Kelly, I just want to make sure I understand. And I know that you're talking about, just in general terms, no decisions are made about how to deliver curriculum sort of in that block schedule. But what you're talking about is fewer subjects delivered to the students during a particular day. At the end of the year, they will have gotten the same amount of math, the same amount of ELA, the same amount of science. It's just rather than delivering it steadily, one subject at a time every day, you would do 4 subjects one day for a period of weeks. And then when you get to the end of a particular block of curriculum, you mix things up and you drop science to pick up some other subject for that part of the year, and then you just, as you transition through the year, you're getting the full delivery of curriculum.
That's correct. If I go back to the high school example, if we were running a non-semesterized high school, your average class length on a 5-day cycle would be 40 minutes. If you went to a 4x4 block schedule, your average class length would be 80 minutes. You'd double that. So you'd finish in half of those classes at the end of semester 1, and then you would move into the other half in semester 2.
Okay.
It would look different in middle school and elementary, but it would be done differently. Right. But it can be done.
I think I see the inherent benefit to doing something like that now, because the fewer transitions through the building during the day, I think, will be beneficial to being able to stay in session in person. But I think that what I'm hearing too is that that's not an atypical delivery of curriculum anyway, regardless of COVID-19. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then I want to make sure I heard clearly. So right now, Littleton's goal, as is the goal, I think, of what I'm reading from the DESE guidance, is to plan for full-time in-person schooling at the buildings, and that the hybrid and remote learning options are currently being considered as contingencies that may need to be implemented depending on how things evolve over time. Am I correct on that?
That's right, and that's the message and direction that we're getting from the state at this point in time. We superintendents have spent a lot of time with the commissioner and also the medical experts that are working with the Department of Education, and they are promoting in-person learning in September at this time, right, providing we can meet the physical space requirements and the PPE equipment, etc.
Okay, and then you made a comment about the need to do our planning in a way that, regardless of which of the three modes we use at any given point, that our delivery of curriculum is consistent. And I appreciate the point that Justin was making. It'll be interesting to see how we manage one-on-one device usage at K through 5. I think there's some challenges there. You talked about it, Kelly. I mean, people ask you to use your pen, and you don't want to be a jerk and say no, but you are a jerk and say no for the right reasons. It's going to be very difficult to ask a 6-year-old to be a jerk and say, don't touch my stuff. Some do, some are much more sharing. But I think it's important that we're striving for that, because I think that'll give us the most chance of success as we, if we have to move back and forth through these different models. I think positioning ourselves in a manner, and I appreciate the answer that you gave to Matt about the question of if we are in a hybrid or wholly remote learning, that we'll have more opportunity and more time to plan to make it feel like a regular school day than we were able to do because of the constraints we faced this past spring. I appreciate the comments you made about the budget impact, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that during the budget subcommittee update. But to be honest, the thing that I'm most concerned about is not the money, the lack of money, it's the lack of time. I know we're talking about, and we want to, think about how to, involve parents in the community in our planning and keep them abreast of what's going on. But this is going to be it's going to be a dead sprint. And I'm worried that we're not going to have the time to do it the way we would normally do it. When we have the time to do it, to involve parents and get the involvement of students on committees and planning and task force, it's the right thing to do. I appreciate that we're going to try to continue to do that, but I'm worried that we're going to not have the time or the luxury to really do it the way we want to. And I hope the community understands that as long as we're explaining to them why we feel like we're going to have to do things in a less optimal way, especially relative to how we have involvement, I think it's important that they understand it. But if we need to do it, we need to do it, given the constraints that we're going to face on time. I mean, the fact that we have to, and I was counting on my fingers earlier, I think we basically have less than 9 weeks to come up with 3 complete plans for the delivery of curriculum, 3 distinct in-person, hybrid, and remote, all distinct. In 9 weeks is ridiculous. It can't really be done well. it's going to be done well enough, I hope, and I'm confident that it will be done well enough. But we're fooling ourselves if we think we're going to be doing this in an optimal manner. We just don't have the time. And it may very well turn out that we don't have, the funding necessary to do it the right way. I think in Littleton, I agree with you, Kelly, that I think we're in better position than many other communities. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that we're going to have a good school year this year, very probably better than we had this year, because we do have some more time to be able to do with this. But we're still going to be in a mitigating mode of operation where we're trying to do the best we can to mitigate the negative impacts of what we're all going through and what our students and staff are facing. And I think we all need to be cognizant of that. And I think that'll help us work together to do as well as we can. So any other comments about that?
Because one thing I didn't say, Mike, is even when these models are completed, and you hear me use the word green print a lot, I very seldom use blueprint, they're going to have to be tweaked depending on the other factors that are going to come into play. There are certain things we can't predict, and even something as important as childcare. Our childcare facilities going to be open if we have to go to a remote learning environment. So we have to, we know what we're doing, but it's like anything else. Until you know all the factors, environmental factors and other variables that come into play, we have to be flexible. We have to think on our feet. But having the plan pretty well honed is going to help immensely. And having that 3 months for teachers to dip their toe in the water is going to help. I've been fortunate enough in my career to have distant learning branches in my districts prior to this one. So, I'm experienced with online learning, and also experienced with having teachers connect via social media when students aren't in school. So we're moving in that direction. My hope is that when we have these models together, there will be enough consistency between these three models. So if we have to toggle between them, even though our students are at home for a period of time or half time, whatever we end up doing for part of the year, and maybe we don't have to do any of those, they will still remain connected to their teachers via Google Meet or Zoom during the day. It's just, you have to really think about your approach to teaching. And it doesn't matter whether you're in high school or teaching grade 1, the pacing of your instruction is key to the success of student learning. So in any medium, I don't care whether it's in school or have students at home, you're not going to be lecturing for 40 or 80 minutes to your students. You're going to break it up into various activities and engage students in the learning process. And I think if we can cement that in a philosophical underpinning, in terms of how we move forward, that's going to help us develop these models immensely. But again, as you know, Mike, all of these things are negotiable because they're considered to be a change in working conditions. So,
Brad, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. I may demonstrate why I couldn't get a second earlier on. I'm just going to emphasize that I do think it's important that where possible, while making good progress, to have parent voices involved. I just think it is, especially, there's a lot of anxiety in the town, and having more people who kind of are feeling this, and not just seeing it from an educational or pedagogical or curriculum standpoint, but also seeing how their kids' social emotional lives are going to be impacted by this. I think it's important to have those voices. I understand the timeline. I also understand we have a lot of really talented, motivated parents who can probably make some meetings. We have epidemiologists, we have people who are educators themselves, we have people, who are, raising kids with special needs. And as we make these plans, having those perspectives involved in ways that allow us to hit our timelines is going to be, it's going to be challenging, but I think it's important.
I agree. I think it is important. And like I said, given our typical practice, there's no question that we would do it, and I expect that we will do it. I think my concern is the level that we're going to be able to do it to isn't going to be as significant as we would normally want to do and try to do. And the only other comment I would make too is I think we need to remember that all of our staff and educators and administrative staff are living this just as we are. They have kids, they have families, they have concerns. Kelly brought up a good point. If we go into another type of shutdown and daycares and other alternatives for childcare are closed, that's so impactful on parents and our staff are parents. So there are things that are going to be out of our control. But again, I agree with you. If we can get that, as much of that input as we can, we will definitely strive to do that. So I appreciate the input. We're going to meet regularly throughout the summer. I'll put a schedule out with Kelly. And I realize that in all likelihood, this will be the primary and maybe the only topic really for the summer, and that's fine. But that meeting regularly will, again, also help the community stay abreast as well as ourselves. So we'll plan on that. This works out well. This is the second section in the agenda for input from interested citizens. So if there are any interested citizens who would like to speak about what we've just been talking about or anything else, please use the raise your hand function.
Aaron. Oh, yes, there is. Cal? Go ahead. Can she? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is.
Just need to unmute. You just need to unmute your microphone. Oh, there you go.
I had a question about the Chromebooks. Are they going to be going back and forth with the K-5 students? Or are they going to be something that stays in school?
That really, we're still in the middle of discussions. I mean, obviously, if we were in some type of hybrid model, they would be going home or virtual learning. But it would most likely depend on the grade, et cetera. We want to make sure that what we're doing is going to be beneficial and not putting too much pressure on parents to have their grade 1 student make sure it's in their backpack every day, et cetera. So we need to hear from our teachers in those grade levels as well. I've always had the philosophy that it's better to have students have everything they need when they need it. But I want to make sure that I'm not missing something in terms of our students in younger grades.
You obviously haven't seen what my children have done to my Chromebook in distance learning. I have a first grader. I have an incoming first grader and an incoming second grader, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm so glad about it. Don't get me wrong, but that's an awful lot of responsibility being thrown in a backpack, put on a bus. I mean, it definitely is possible, and kids rise up to the responsibility that you give to them usually. But there's always, the 5 Chromebooks that are going to have cracked screens too.
Yeah.
So, and is the Chromebook being given to K through 5 or 1 through 5? Because you said both a couple of times.
It's grade 1. We're looking at iPads, et cetera, for the younger grades, and pre-K and K. We're gonna need some robust discussions in terms of how are we going to handle remote learning or hybrid learning if it occurs. We also have to consider what's appropriate for students at that age level. We can't expect them to be engaged full time 6 hours a day. I mean, that's just totally unrealistic. So we need to make sure that we come up with a learning plan in each of those models that's going to be conducive to learning and going to keep our students engaged and not expect too much of them. We want our students to love coming to school and love to learn. We don't want to be doing things that are going to change that.
Well, I think all the parents want their kids to go to school, and they love them to go to school too. Okay, I just had a question about the Chromebooks. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. All right, are there any other interested citizens who'd like to speak before the school committee?
There are not, Mike.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go into subcommittee reports. I'm not going to put our new members on the spot just yet, so we'll skip PMBC and policy. I would like to talk a little bit about the budget. I was listening to NPR today, and there was a report about the state and the budget process with the state. And basically, the governor and the legislature are waiting for more information on tax collections and other data regarding funding for the state budget. And they deferred the income tax filing deadline, so they don't have all the information on income tax collections and things like that. They're also waiting to see if there's any indication from the federal government about funding, bailout funding that would be allocated directly to states or communities or school districts to inform how the budget is going to look at the state level and passed on down to the local level. And what they've done is they passed a continuation funding resolution to fund the state budget and local budgets or local aid through July, because we're in the second day of fiscal 21. And they are and that funding is gives level funding to communities based on their FY20 local aid funding, which, if that is how it goes throughout the rest of the year, would actually be fine for Littleton and the Littleton Public School District, because all of our budget modeling was done based on level funding of local aid. So, but what they did indicate in the report was that the state is anticipating that there may very well be a series of monthly funding resolutions that could go into the fall. So there may be, again, a level of uncertainty that we've never had to deal with. We may not know until October, November, what our local budget is actually going to look like relative to local aid. They did indicate that if they do continue the funding resolutions, that it would probably continue to be funded at a level funding from fiscal 20, which would make our budget work the way we currently have it modeled. So that's all I have for now on that. There'll be more information coming, but it probably won't be immediate. We'll have to be patient on that. All right. Is there any other comments or questions or business to be considered? All right. We do not need an executive session at this point, so I will entertain a motion for adjournment. You got to unmute yourself, Matt.
So moved.
So moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Very good. This will be a roll call vote. Matt?
Matt Hunt, yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Timolin?
Millen Rassius, yes.
Brad?
Brad Austin, yes.
And Mike Fontanella votes yes as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dorothy and Bettina, and thank you, LCTV. We appreciate it. Judy Reed, thank you. And we will get our meeting schedule out for the rest of the summer and see you soon. Enjoy the holiday. Thank you.